Welcome to the Edifice Complex, the property design and development podcast. Let your hosts Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean keep you up with who is innovating and doing great work, perspective on the adjacent possible, and challenges to the status quo.
Welcome to the Edifice Complex. I'm Robert Bean, your co-host, unofficial mediator, here with my colleague, official agitator. Again, heavy emphasis on agitator, friend and Yoda, most everything to do with buildings, Mr. Adam Muggleton. Say hello, sir. Yoda.
Hello there. I think I should be upgraded to angry old man, actually, from agitator, because that's really where I am now.
Let's do that for the next. We'll do that for the next episode. Angry old man. Our guest today is a qualified architect who earned dual honors, actually, in architecture and from the University of Greenwich. He landed in Germany for his first gig, and then back to the UK, working his way up to his role today as a practice director for a multi-award-winning firm of Marks and Barfield Architects. But in between that, he led a number of teams working on projects like the Sandera headquarters in Triton Square, ARB's Phase 2 in Fritzovia, I'm going to say, Imperial College London Frameworks Project, and Burlington Danes, which I guess is a healthcare research imaging center. In one of his tours, and I actually want to talk about this, he spent 9 years at Ren Insurance, which provides professional indemnity insurance for architects. That should be actually an interesting part. Lots of interesting stuff here, but I want to talk a little bit about that. So welcome to the show, Ian Rudolph. Good to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here. Good to see you both.
Yeah. Ian, after all your years in practice, I think 1990s when you first started your formal education in architecture. But then in your bio, you planted a professional flag, and that professional flag says, above all, the key aim now is to embody regenerative design in practice. That's got a lot of stuff in it. So I want you to tell our audience, our listeners, about the ethos of your journey. Like, how did you started in school, your formal education, and then now you've planted this flag. What happened in between? Tell us that.
Well, I suppose at university, I was always interested in environmental studies and designing in a way that's improved the environment, and also looked at the long-term goals of reducing carbon emissions. And actually, you mentioned in the intro, thank you very much for such a great intro, the work I did in Germany. It was in the middle of my sort of formal architectural education. I worked as a year-out student in Germany. Had to learn German very, very quickly. But you can, with architecture, you can communicate with drawings, so that's quite helpful when you're learning the language. But a lot of the projects we were working on were timber framed passive solar architecture, housing, mainly one-off housing. But it was, I suppose, really pushing the boundaries of what was happening in the UK, but it was becoming quite the norm in Germany. And that was in the 90s. So when I came back to the UK for, to complete the postgraduate, many years, as you know, it's 7 years to become an architect. It was only when I came back that I realized how much I had actually absorbed and taken in. And a lot of what they were doing in Germany was what we were doing at university in a theoretical way, but they were actually already doing it. So I stuck with that. There was a recession when we were sort of qualifying. You have to finish, when you finish your postgraduate, you have to go out and work for another year before you qualify as an architect. And with the recession in the UK, and it was one of those things with a UK education, you had to, if you'd worked abroad for 1 year, you had to work for the second year of your professional experience in the UK. But then there was a recession. So where do you work? So I was working in an environment for a small practice that really just responded to whatever work was there. So for about a year, it was very difficult to try and do what you trained up to do. So working in commercial Asda supermarkets, commercial buildings. And it wasn't until I came back into London, because that was while I was working in Cambridge, came back to London. I was fortunate enough to work with a team on a great project which was designing the Motorola headquarters. And it all started coming back, energy efficient building, energy efficient design. So it suddenly felt all that sort of research and passion at university was now being able to sort of find itself into the professional environment. And then I was never anyone when I was going through my career that was sort of certain about whether I was going to run a practice, be part of a small practice, large practice, or anything like that, or even specialism. But it was that sort of drive to create low energy buildings that was, I suppose, my focus at the beginning. But then it was really, you'd move from project to project, and the projects were big enough that you were only ever working on one project for 2 to 3 years or 4 years, or with one project I worked on with Adam, I was on it for 3.5 years. So
Wow.
these things, the profession for me was very much project by project basis rather than where you worked, and it could be very different. Where I am now at Marks Barfield, we're a smaller practice, but we have so many projects that are of different sort of sectors that you work across sectors as well. So in a larger practice, you'd only be working in one sector. Here, we're working across, and it's far more challenging, but it's far more interesting as well. And really, just picking up on the regenerative bit, at the time of the pandemic here in the UK, lots of our projects were stopping, and we were working the whole office on one project actually while it was continuing on site, and it kept us going through the difficult parts of the pandemic. But what we decided to do was, as a practice, look back upon what we should do and what the direction of our practice should be. And I suppose because in the headline figures, in the climate crisis, 60% of the UK waste, figures that you'll be familiar with, were all coming from the construction industry. Now that is, something
That's
like
huge.
120 million tons of waste. 42% of UK's total carbon emissions are attributed to the built environment, and that's according to the UK Green Building Council. And 50% of all raw materials mined and harvested annually are consumed by the construction industry. So, I had the figures are a bit of a wake-up call, because that's sort of 20 years into my career, and you kind of think, well, hang on, what are we doing? We went into it to try and create a better environment, but we're creating all this waste, we're creating all this carbon, and we're depleting the Earth's resources while we're doing it. So we need to really, really change. And we decided at Marks Barfield to change our approach and move towards becoming a regenerative design practice. So we're still on that journey, but we've been doing it now for, I suppose, 6 years. We set ourselves a new direction. Where will we be in 5 years, 10 years? And by the time, we become a regenerative practice, we'll shout and say that that's what we are. But I think it's an ongoing goal. There's quite a few. We're not the only architects doing that. There's quite a few architects in London doing that. And one of the sort of promises we've made to the industry is to share all that intelligence as well.
That's great. Ian, just so our audience, maybe you could define what regenerative architecture is all about, because a lot of people, you hear that word, you read it in papers, but for you, what does that mean?
So for us, I mean, our ethos has always been that design is a powerful tool for good, both social and environmental. But what it can improve the quality of people's lives and lifts their spirits. That's a sort of given. That's the excitement of it. But what we want to do is do that by drawing on the minimum of Earth's limited resources. We don't want to deplete the resources that are there. So if our direction can also, while we take a little bit, we give back more, that means that the process that we're designing is becoming regenerative. So we're at one with nature, or we're improving nature while we go along.
So the regenerative is actually, you're trying to generate a net positive.
And net
in the
positive,
overall
absolutely.
equation of that project, right?
Yes. And you can do that to a greater or lesser degree on projects, but that's our goal.
A couple of thoughts there. One is, a lot of that stuff would be hard to put a value on it. Like what's the math, the calculus to come up with, where's the benchmark, and where does the tipping point occur where you're actually regenerative as opposed to depletion? So that's one thing that if you can comment on. And the second one, well, maybe this is for later, is that my experience in the design world, as much as part of our ethical requirements has to do with humanity and being responsible for Earth resources, these types of things. But until the contract is signed and it's about the client and what they want, and the conflict that can occur between their desires and our own ethos, and ultimately trying to, from a business point of view, stay in business. So, there's two things there. One, how do you value some of those things that are in your equation? And the second thing is, how do you resolve the conflict between what you want as an organization, as a company, and then your client's desires that might be in conflict with that?
Yeah, I mean, there are challenges along the way, and to answer it's a work in progress, most definitely. So to answer your question now, it would be different, the answer I gave in a year's time and 5 years' time. But there are many tools out there to measure on a project by project basis how much carbon a building uses in embodied carbon as it's being built and in operation. And the terms, everyone's very quickly skilling up about that. And one of the calculations that we do and we run across all our projects is we work out the whole life carbon assessment. And it could be, you mentioned benchmarks, that there's a sort of target that the RIBA have set of around 750 for projects to achieve as the whole life carbon by 2030. We think that's too high. You can do much better than that. We sort of embraced that and actually did an audit on a project that was like a 200,000 square foot office mixed use development project that we did in Houston that completed. That was the project that completed after the recession. And we started designing that in 2016 and it completed on site in 2022. And we did an audit using to assess the whole life carbon. And we got it peer reviewed because we didn't necessarily calculate it all properly the first time. We misinterpreted some of the guidelines on how to do that, but we got other professionals to peer review it. And the figure we ended up with as the whole life carbon assessment was 730. So that's better than the RIBA target for 2030. So we were sort of 730 and their target was 750. So, without even knowing about all these benchmarks and calculations that were there and the targets, we had designed a building that was better than what the RIBA was saying that everyone should achieve by 2030. So it made us feel, well, actually, this is really quite possible, and we can do better when we know, and we really sort of push that into our design from day one. We've done it across. We've ended an audit across all of our projects, and as I mentioned, we were working in different sectors. So, an education building, a small classroom building. That was our desire. We've got planning approval for this now. Is for the building to be 100% or as close to 100% out of reused materials. So
Wow.
that's sort of our sort of poster boy project, I suppose, for the circular economy. That the carbon calculations for that currently, and this is just at the design stage, is by comparison to the 750, it's about 180. So it's a work in progress. So we know it's possible. You can reduce carbon by reusing material. It feels a bit more tangible. The less new material you're using, the less resources you're calling on, and the more existing waste material that you're using, you're basically not taking and depleting the Earth's resources. So from those two extremes, we then have something that, as our business as usual, we know we can improve on the RIBA standards, and we know that with our prototype project, which is 2 classrooms built out of 100% or as near to 100% reclaimed material, we know we can get very, very low carbon footprint indeed. And then we've got quite a few projects that are somewhere in the middle around the 350 mark. So that's using a software that's recognized in the industry to assess that. But the main driver is really right from the beginning is trying to reduce the carbon by, before you do any calculations, just the approach. You have to have clients that will buy into that approach, obviously. So we mention it to the clients right from day one. Our appointment letter actually has a clause in it that says we will be working to reduce carbon from day one, and we'll take you on a journey. Essentially, are you up for that? And we'll gauge right at the beginning how much or how little a client may know and how much they'll be prepared to go for it.
And are you prepared to walk away from projects if the client?
Well, it's interesting. It's an interesting question, because we actually, when we were talking about the change in direction of our practice, we actually thought, would we be walking away from some work? We've not had to have that discussion about any project yet, because I think the more people, we've put things out on social media, we've shared information that we've gathered through our research, and we've attracted the right clients so far. Arguably, we may have put some clients off as well, but then we haven't had to have those discussions because they haven't come to us to say, no,
right,
we want to employ you, but we don't want to do this. So so far it's working well.
Yeah. Adam, as a ex-property developer, right? If you approached a design team and said, well, this is what we want to do, and they pushed back and said, yeah, no, you're evil. This is our ethos. This is who we take on as clients. How long would you be?
I have thoughts on all this. So most people should know that all property developers are Prince Joffrey from Game of Thrones deep down. At their core, that's who they are. Right? Ian's laughing nervously because he knows that's true. So just to get my priors out of the way, so I went to Greenwich as well, so we're buds. I first met Ian, I said early aughts at a massive development designed by Max Farrell, actually master planned by Terry Farrell. So I met Ian there. I always remember wandering down into the data center at the bottom of the Abbey National Building, you snagging the raised floor, and you got so many snags out of that floor. I was so impressed. Anyway,
well, it was a plenum. It had to be perfect, didn't it?
Yeah, I agree, but I
had to retain air.
I rarely meet an architect who understands. I'm like, oh shit. You had this A4 pad, and there was like, oh, this wobbles. So I thought, we're going to get on great. Anyway, that's an aside. And for our North American listeners, Asda in the UK is Walmart, just so you know. So yeah, it's an inglorious start, right? Working on Walmart, or as we used to call it in British slang, shed bashing.
Yes.
No shed bashers allowed at M3 when we were there, by the way. Now let's get on to what we're talking about. Now, developers are not all created equal, right? And they've all got some variation of a 0 to 10 of the Prince Joffrey gene. Now, I think certainly if you're a property developer, you just want to build something, have it be awesome, and be able to rent it out, right? What's the old saying, design the box, build the box, rent the box. That's property 101, right? That was my first day at M3. Let me explain this, Adam. You're not an engineer anymore. We design the box, we build the box, we rent the box, and good night. So there's that. But architecture and property is more than that, right? It's a statement of power. It's a status symbol. Companies attach their corporate identity to a AAA building, right? So it is way more than just a building, let's be honest. So if the general mood of the culture is towards sustainable design, regenerative design, this works, right? But I think you're probably in the space at the moment of trying to find the right dance partner for that, right? If I had gone through a beauty contest, this is what we call hiring architects in the UK. It's called a beauty contest, right? If you had gone through the beauty contest with you, then right at the end, I'm sitting at my desk getting through, and I got your appointment there and gone, what's this clause? Did your gal come in? So, what is going on here?
You made me think of speed dating or something like that. But, not that I've ever done that.
That's hilarious.
But no, I 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I would say I completely agree with you, Adam. But now, definitely in London, there are so many examples where that's not the case with developers.
Right.
I mean, there's been a shift, and there was from sort of 2016 onwards, while we were developing the Lantern in Euston. This the funders have an ESG commitment to all of their shareholders, and they have to demonstrate that within the projects. If a developer's taking a development loan from a bank, the bank will say, "What's your ESG drive?" And that's
right.
very, very critical on the funding side. It's become more and more critical now, where there are companies setting up to protect people who claim what they're doing in order to be environmentally green or superior, so that a counterclaim can't be made against them in the future when it's proven that they actually didn't do all of that. It's a really big thing now. So we've actually found that it's not been difficult to find the right developers. There are quite a few in the UK. British Land are doing it. GPE are doing it. Lazari Investments are doing it. And I'm going to mention Lazari Investments because we were working on an office refurbishment for them. We were doing the Cat A. Another team was doing the Cat B. They had already secured, this is in London, in Baker Street, 50,000 square foot. They'd already secured a tenant. Part of the journey to securing the tenant was allowing us to present what type of design we were going to do, what we were going to turn this existing 1980s building, refurbish it ready for a law firm to come in and occupy it as the sole occupier. And it has retail on the ground floor and the usual mixed-use development things. They were really keen on the ESG strengths of the project, the environmental strength of the project, and in particular, the reuse of materials that we were going to say we wanted to use. We'd walked around the building, so I suppose it was a happy circumstance in a way, because it was coming out of the pandemic. The previous tenant was shrinking in size and moving out of the building. They had done a refurbishment 3 years before the pandemic, and it had barely been used. So to just your average architect walking around, when we were looking at the site, taking our photographs and so on, we thought, well, there's all this new fit out that can be reused, probably in a different way for the tenant coming in.
Yeah.
So we started auditing all the materials. We did it our own way, old school photographs, area schedules, Excel spreadsheet, all of that.
Good day.
And we did that as part of our service for Lazari Investments. We showed all of that to the tenant. The tenant team, the incoming tenant, really liked all of that, and they said, yes, we want to reuse materials, but we will have our own Cat B architect that comes on board. We were then left to continue getting the building ready, doing the Cat A developer's design. And in that process, we started on the journey with the developer to say, we're going to continue that audit just on the Cat A. Well, here's all the materials. This is what can be reused in the Cat A. This is what could be reused in the Cat B. And if it can't be reused in the building, these are the materials that could be reused elsewhere. And it just so happened we had a project for a charity that could use lots of materials. We had other people that we were starting to get to know in our peer group that could also reuse materials. So that was the beginning of the journey on this project with the developer. I could go into lots of detail about it, but the headlines are for a development project that was for the developer only 13.5 million. We actually saved 1.65 million in terms of capital costs by getting them to think a different way and reuse materials. That whole carbon saving as well is, 577,000 kilograms CO2. It's huge. So it's the carbon saving and the capital saving. The tenant coming in would hear about all those figures, and they loved that because they could then go back to their partnership of the law firm that were all moving from Mayfair to Baker Street. So, but in several buildings into one building. And part of that attraction for them was they could go back to all their clients and say, we're doing all of this. We're saving as much carbon as possible. It's not going to be business as usual. It's just a start. But it was a process that we then, when we went out to tender with the main contractor, and it was a two-stage tender, they bought into the process as well. And in fact, by then, we were sort of going through our process, but the developer caught up and actually in the first interview with the contractor said, by the way, this is what Marks Barfield and Lazari have developed to reuse material. We want you to consider every material. So not just look at our schedule, every material that you see, can it be reused? Can you take it off carefully and put it to one side? And that's what they did. And in the underlining sort of driver to all of this was to get a tenant in the building. So a date had already been agreed for getting that tenant in. Otherwise, there are, liquidated asset damages and so on. The date was still met. In fact, we were a week ahead of schedule, and we reused things like fire doors, which had to go through its own independent certification for reuse and certification. And that whole process, all at the landlord's risk, was a 9-month process to go from the inception of reusing to getting it certified under the original, recertified under the original fire classification of the internal fire doors. That was a huge saving. We saved things like raised floors. The advisors for the tenant were saying, "You signed this agreement for lease. You should be getting new raised floors in this building." So they did the due diligence on every reuse of material as well. So there was sort of a double check, plus for some packages an independent assessor as well. And what we found in the course of this project was there are raised floor contractors out there who refurbish raised floors. But so many people were throwing away raised floors when they're doing a churn on a building. So they've just gathered it all, refurbished it, and they'll sell it back. And we actually are just on, sorry to bore you with the details.
No, that's good.
But just on that one package, we ended up tendering it to complete reclaimed raised floor or reuse the existing raised floor. And we ended up going to 6 contractors who all came up with, it was only meant to be 3, but there were 2 streams going on to get the prices. One would take the existing floor tiles off-site, refurbish them and bring them back. And another one would do it in situ. So we had 2 And obviously our client, as a developer, took the most cost-effective one, which was to keep the raised floor tiles on site. The contractor had to stack them all up neatly and move them around each floor while they were doing their fit out until they needed to go back. And then we found things in that process that aren't in an architect's specification, where originally the raised floor pedestals, which are, adjustable, as you know, they're either screwed down at the base or glued down at the base, but then the top has a locking nut.
Yeah.
What raised floor contractors used to do in the 80s is they would, after doing the locking nut, fastening it, they would then put glue over it. That glue meant you couldn't reuse that pedestal. So we had to get new pedestals. So a lot of, steel was thrown away. So in our specification now across all our projects, we actually prohibit the use of after you've put the locking nut, you can't glue it. So these are things that we didn't know was happening back in
But that's still on them pedestals that the glue can still be recycled, right?
It can be recycled, but it's downcycling. So the last point of call is it goes to recycling, which is downcycling, which is another process which burns carbon and so on. But the front end is, can you reuse it in situ, in the same location or in a different location? Can you then reuse it elsewhere? And that process has now become, for that developer, a template that they have documented that template, that process of reuse of materials. And they now impose that as a framework to all of their design team on various projects. So we've influenced that process with them.
Ian, do you see these projects as having enough motive force that others are starting to come into the wake, and getting pulled in?
Absolutely.
And that there's an actual critical mass developing, that at some point we could actually anticipate the old way of doing, Adam's old way of doing things
just goes away. Yeah.
Just goes away.
Goes away. Yeah, absolutely. It's not, I mean, the headlines are, we can't continue business as usual, or we will hit the tipping point of where you've done so much damage to the planet, you can't recover from it. And that doesn't help anyone. Yeah. All of the lead developers that I just mentioned, they have taken upon themselves to do a prototype project where they are doing more of the reuse of material. On the lantern, although we weren't pushing for the reuse, and one of the sort of happy things that came out of it is we ended up starting off by trying to reuse the whole structure of the building, but because we added floors on and the loads of a 1960s building couldn't actually deal with the increased load of the floors above without putting in lots of downstand beams on the two floors at the top, which the agents didn't like. They're things you could touch. It's quirky, it might suit an architect's studio, but it may not suit
clear offices with no columns is what everybody wants, right?
So well, interestingly, the columns are no longer an issue. People can actually work with columns. But so the building ended up in the design being demolished down to ground, and we built a new building on the existing foundations and piles of a 1960s building, keeping the basement and the ground floor slab, and then you have a new structure above. So the inherent structural grid of the building that looks new is actually from a 1966.6 grid. And the M&E and the internal layouts all work with that. But that's allowed us to it gives the feeling of a new building, but it's essentially reusing 33% of the existing concrete structure, which is all in the basement. And that saved on the program about 6 months of the construction program.
Because a lot of the risk in a job is in the below ground work, right?
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Well, and it's tested and proven, it's not going to fail as long as your loads don't exceed the original design, right? So
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's still a risk with it, but nothing is without risk. But these So in the UK, in London, there are a lot of these pilot projects going on where developers are getting rid of material, putting it on material exchange platforms, and there are companies out there that will do what we were doing in a old-fashioned way, Excel. They'll do it digitally, and they'll create a database of all this material that can be reused. So you can itemize material in a building before it's stripped out and see if there are platforms now, see if people want to use that material before it's stripped out.
The Edifice complex will continue in just a moment.
Are you struggling with paperwork, spreadsheet overload, and project management? Then Blue Rhythm is the solution to help you. Streamline your commissioning and project management process. Go paperless, increase efficiency, and save money. Blue Rhythm is commissioning and project management software by practitioners for practitioners, adapting to your workflows and processes, and doing things your way. Blue Rhythm provides painless and fast onboarding by bringing your existing workflows, forms, checklists, and issues logs into Blue Rhythm for you. You can use their pre-built templates to customize your commissioning workflows. And Blue Rhythm can fully handle the transition from your current software platform. Blue Rhythm is secure, scalable, and reliable, backed by amazing support, and accessible 24/7 on any Windows, iOS, or Android device. Why are you still using paper and hard-to-control spreadsheets? Start your free Blue Rhythm account today at bluerhythm.com.
And now, back to the show.
So many thoughts in my head right now, because again, I'm out of the UK for 20 years now plus, so clearly, strangely, things have moved on without me. I don't know how that happened. So from a contractor's point of view, it just sounds like extra work. But they're having to do it because when you've got people like British Land and Great Portland Estates doing it, it's a wrap. Everyone's going to be doing it at some point, right? Because that's like, that's Man U, Arsenal, and everyone. But is there carbon accounting is one thing, then carbon trading is another thing. Reuse of the materials. What I'm hearing is there is a market forming, like a secondary market forming where materials are listed and traded. So if I'm a contractor, is there a source of money for me where I'm incentivized to take the materials, list them, and then if I sell them, I win that money, I keep that money?
Yeah, so there's a few things here. The strip out deconstruction contractors or the strip out contractors are now rebadging themselves as deconstruction contractors.
I love it.
So the material can be reused.
That's great.
And there are a few. It's probably only a handful at the moment of those that concentrated on office strip outs, and not necessarily demolition, but a strip out of material, that are now creating material banks, warehouses for the materials. The storage is a blocker, especially in London. Where do all these materials, and even with the project, Baker Street project that I mentioned, when some of the materials were reused in one of our charity projects, the one that we're making out of 100% reused materials, that's all gone into a store until that charity has the funding to build it. So there are always blockages along the way, as you would expect.
And if that storage is outside London, there's a carbon cost to that, right?
There's exactly. So you find the storage where you can, as close to the site as possible. And then quite often that storage is somewhere that's temporarily available, maybe for a few years, and then you have to move it again. So there are lots of these hurdles to take into account. Where I think the market could work really well is having a few of these strategically located material banks, physical material banks, as well as the virtual material banks. So the virtual ones, people are finding out about the material before it is stripped out, before a building's demolished, and then they can arrange their own delivery and take the materials off that person who's demolishing. At the moment, when that happens, that's all happening for free because people are quite happy to get rid of it It improves their carbon credentials of the project.
Yeah.
It improves their ESG. For a strip out contractor, they're not paying for a skip. They're not paying to get rid of that
Yeah. So at
material.
the
So
moment, that's a
they're saving
win-win-win. Yeah.
they're saving money. So
Yeah.
there's an financial incentive for them as well as there being the carbon incentive for the landlord. And we drew up a list of all the great estates, let's say, around London, and we've been arranging CPDs, giving them CPDs about the subject, the circular economy. We've been showing them the case study of 22 Baker Street and the charity project Oasis Play, which is the nursery classrooms. And it's interesting, some of them have said, well, we've actually done one of those projects before, but we've not really considered, the carbon. We've made a community building out of waste. And so we're not too far away from everyone realizing, yes, we can do that, because I know of a project where it's been done before. It's just not done in the guise of circular economy or regenerative design. All the local authorities and the government, there is a government circular economy task force here as well in the UK. That's all come in the last 10 years. And if you take Westminster, for instance, where the Baker Street project is, they have added into their local plan that you need to issue a circular economy statement when you are putting forward your planning application for a development. And so all of those developers now have to be prepared to come up with this statement, come up with an approach. And there's this loosely spoken about target of in Westminster of reusing 50% of material of your building, whether that's structure or material, or if you can't do that, you've tried as hard, and this is you then declare with the new building, this is the carbon footprint. All of that now is happening. So there is quite a specialized, but it's becoming mainstream set of tasks and industry that has come out of this.
Yeah, just a question for you. How much of this is getting driven back into the manufacturing industry? Because that has to, if you're going to be on this game, you're going to have to start producing products with the intent that knowing that they have to be recycled. So the materials you use, the geometry, how you make it, everything has to be considered up front before it goes into the instant, right?
So we have quite a few strands going on, and I've worked with a really talented team who are becoming quite specialist, knowing where within their peer group throughout the construction industry who are the right people to go to straight away in different sectors. There are groups within the interior design suppliers that have set up specifically to challenge this and see what they can do. Can they do take back schemes? There are various companies that do that for light fittings, for carpets, for raised floors,
partitions.
For partitions. Metal ceilings has probably got a way to catch up, but it's growing. Ironmongery as well. They do that. There may not be a cost saving in that, but they are working out how they can do that at a reduced rate to make it financially attractive as well. We have been talking to in the UK. You have the MBS specifications as a sort of standard template for writing specifications. All architects use that or something similar. We've had in our office a couple of workshops with them already to get them to update their specification templates so that it includes a deconstruction specification. We created our own for 22 Baker Street and for other projects that have followed. So we've had to manipulate the standard templates to create a deconstruction or demolition specification. And other architects, there are a few others who are doing the same. We're not on our own.
On the deconstruction spec then, so that would go out to the Kelbrays, the demolition people who are now deconstruction of people. Right?
Well, it would go out with all the tender. It would go out as part of the preliminaries for the whole project. So, imagine um, the main contractors receiving it. They know that they have to allow for that in their tender. It is an extra resource to do things that way, but it is necessary. So they are possibly, the projects have to be of a certain scale where the developers are willing to really make a lot of it. But there are the odd smaller prototype projects that the big developers are doing as well. And one of my colleagues has been seconded into one of those prototype projects, which was for a material exchange company, where we were actually, because it's early days, helping this material exchange company set up, essentially a startup company. And their model is to give all the materials a value. So they're creating a futures market. So before the materials are stripped out of the building, that owner, the landlord of that building, understands the value of all their assets. Previously, it was just, as you said earlier on, rental asset, and maybe the building has a value. But every material is just waste in the wrong place. It's not really waste.
I like that. Every material is wasted in the wrong place. That's a soundbite.
It didn't come from me, but I picked
There's
it
the
up,
title for the program, Adam.
Absolutely.
Hey, on this whole note, where my brain went to actually has to do with material hygiene. When you're removing materials from a job site, at some projects, at some point, the hygienic element of that material would need to come into play if you're going to repurpose it and deconstruct it. Adam, where I'm going with this, actually, I'm writing my notes down, is if you had to deconstruct a building that was conditioned with radiant ceiling panels, for example, the hygienic component of that compared to an air-based system is different. We wouldn't have to worry about dusts and particles that are on the panel, but you would definitely have to worry about dusts and whatever else is inside the ductwork. I have a bias for radiant-based systems, but even if I didn't, and I was repurposing sheet metal work, for example, ductwork, by my conscience, wouldn't be able to resell ductwork without making sure that the inside of that ductwork was hygienic. I wouldn't want to pass what was in one job onto the next one, right?
Yeah. But your first, you're absolutely right. So there are certain things that are easier to do and more difficult to do. And one of our takeaways would be, don't try and achieve the impossible. If it feels difficult, it's probably the wrong thing to be doing. Look for the easy wins first. Because it takes time and effort, and ultimately there's still a risk until you start using it and things get recertified. So take those easy wins where you can. But with the duct work, first point would be, could you reuse it in the building? Could you clean it? You do a thorough clean. If it's metal ductwork, you probably can. And can you reconfigure it? That would be the first start. And if you can't, then you take it away to see if it can be reconditioned for reuse. And then if it can't, and it can't be used for another function, then it obviously then gets downcycled. The building that Adam and I worked on 26 years ago now, Adam, probably, in Triton Square. While I was at Marks Barfield, because in the old days, architects would sign all the drawings, and when they become contract drawings, because my name was on the drawings, I got a call from Santander Bank, and you always think, oh no, what's gone wrong? That's just me. That's just me.
But you had experience in the insurance industry, so you were okay.
I'll come on to that. So, but they actually said, we're going to be doing a churn of the ground floor. We want to reimagine it to the new way that we work, get rid of all the old dining meeting rooms that were all timber paneled. And we wanted to turn it into a more flexible, agile working space as a test bed for what we're going to do around the UK for all of our properties. So So it became a job that Marks Barfield took on, and with the engineers, we looked at reusing what we could in there. There wasn't a lot. It was early days. We'd probably tackle things differently now, but this was 10 years ago. We did reuse all the ductwork and as much of the kit as we could, but we reconfigured things, and we did take out the ceilings, the 1980s sort of look of metal ceilings, and we put in only where we needed to a ceiling. Otherwise, we exposed services. And they since then, in the last 2 years, they've had another refurbishment, and they've done that throughout the whole building as much as possible. And they've minimized the amount of materials that they've used in terms of new materials.
I mean, that's a good example, right? That back in the day, quarter of a century ago, oh my God, I feel old. That was a AAA headquarters banking building, and it still is, right? Just the bank's name.
It is, absolutely. Right? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, the fact that they're doing that is a good sign.
Yeah. I mean, the original building is flexible enough to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
So it's also because it's their own building now. They've been able to experiment on it, but now they've done it, and they've changed the way they work with agile working as well. It's great, and it's the production of material.
They had in that building triple active glazing, so recirculating air through the glazing.
Yes.
Wow.
Which makes some really odd HVAC equations. I've got to.
Wow.
I remember sitting down with Andrew Walton about it going, tell me again, like for the 20th time, I'm not getting this. Like, how is this working?
So I wanted to, if I may, Robert, you mentioned the insurance. Because as architects could never. This is a very short version of it. Architects couldn't find in the 70s and 80s the insurance that they needed for their service. There was always something that wasn't quite covered. So a few architects, way before my time, set up a mutual with an insurance company. They got a law firm to manage it for them, and it was one of the firms that was managing Lloyd's shipping insurance as well. So they had experience of a mutual. So essentially, we are, as architects, members of this insurance mutual. There's about 70 members, mainly architects in the southeast of England, and we all have, because it's a mutual, we have these sort of risk workshops throughout the year, and we also, as architects, from time to time, sit on the board to check as the insurance manager's clients that everything is going according to the rules and the ethos. So I sat as a non-exec director on the board for 9 years, and during that time, while working practicing as an architect, during that time, one of the things that we initiated at our sort of group at the time was to try and be risk averse as an insurance and look ahead at where the next risks are, rather than an insurance as the industry normally is, reactionary to risks and problems. Look ahead. Now they were already doing that, but it was underwriters with the probabilities, people looking at spreadsheets and doing things, but they weren't engaging with architects. So we instigated that. So I now still, even though I've retired from the board, I sit on the risk awareness workshop. And that's really helpful for us as a practice, because we're bringing a big risk to the profession by reusing materials. And you can imagine what it was like. The very first meeting, I said, okay, I wrote to the insurance underwriter, and I said, right, I need a contract to adjust our contract. Are you happy with this? Our scope of services, they're bespoke, because we're going to be designing from waste, and they didn't like that.
I was just saying, that sounds like an underwriter sharpening their pencil.
So we've given several CPDs to the insurance company, and they now get it. They're now on board with it, and they're helping us throughout our journey. So everything that we're doing in becoming a regenerative design practice is coming with a service that is insurable. So we've
So you
still
got
got
full
interesting.
indemnity cover for that.
yeah, yeah. But it's a work in progress. So we have to
Right.
keep reporting about changes and telling them about things and,
Right.
keeping them informed. Um, and, as long as I am not supplying material, I'm acting as an agent that says where the material could come from and it could be reused and that could go, then we are completely covered because we're still working as an architect and not as a contractor or supplier of material.
So is
Oh,
there a
that's
premium
interesting.
to your insurance costs for that?
I would say it stays the same for the moment.
Right.
The premium would only happen if there were, I guess, if there were issues in the
But it's
future.
based on precedent of claim as well,
Yeah.
right? So if there's a big claim.
Yeah.
So right, I've got to go all QS and American on you now. So I love all what you're doing here, right? This is like taking I'm a big fan of like the embedded versus operational carbon discussion, particularly with facades, which is a big one, right? And you're taking that further and rolling into the reuse, right? So the real question is, are you making money doing this? And is it scalable?
So I would say the scalable bit is a work in progress for everyone.
Yeah.
And you've got people like British Land trying to do things at scale and testing it in projects, live testing. Can they move part of a concrete floor slab down or up and reuse that concrete rather than demolishing it? So all these things are happening. Lazari are moving facades up to create retail space on a project in Mayfair rather than redesigning all of that. So they're keeping the heritage in Mayfair and then jacking up. People are doing this, and I suppose that's happening at scale. But it's for that developer, it's probably the first time, or they're going a little bit further on the next project and a little bit further on the next one. But it's interesting that so many of the big names are now doing it, and everyone's doing it with different architects to a greater or lesser degree.
Right.
And as long as we all share our experience, and another example that is happening, a developer might be demolishing a building, but there's some steel work. They'll through the engineers talk to another developer that might take on some of that steel work to be reused in a new or a redevelopment
and I-beam
that they're
to
doing. Yeah. So, and there is an industry for that already. It's just that it maybe wasn't as well known about.
Wow.
So, if you think about on the just to make it tangible, if you're an architect design and you've got a design fee for detailing doors, you do 1 to 5 detailing. You have to do all of that joinery details. If you're within that fee, if you're convincing everyone you can reuse those doors, you don't have to do those details further down the line.
Right. So because it sounds like a lot of extra work, but then again, what you're saying is it's displacing other work.
It is. It's probably a lot of extra work at the front end and less work at the end if things go according to plan.
So what you're saying is you're spending more of your fee in concept and schematic and less on construction drawings. Right?
Yeah. And we might be doing some technical design in concept to just check all the options.
Yeah, because you've got to test that. Yeah.
And then when it comes to technical design, it's just reviewing what the contractor's doing and reviewing it very carefully.
So I guess the way this is mainstream is when the Royal Institute of British Architects adjust the fee structure and they front load the fees.
So we are talking to them about adjusting the RIBA plan of works.
Yes, I was going to ask you that.
So that's something that's happening. The discussions are happening at the moment. There's at least 5 architects from the Ren Insurance that we've pulled together to talk to the RIBA about that. So one of my colleagues has done a diagram. The work stages are really circular. You're testing something at the beginning, you're moving it to technical design, then you're going back and retesting it again.
So it's all iterative work now, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's not linear. The linear stages, I think, was set up so that architects could set out a fee structure.
Yeah.
Whereas in reality,
when it was M3, I used to see, that was okay. This stage is that fee. and it was clear and it was clean and everyone got paid. It was great. But this whole thing messes with that completely, right?
We're messing it up. Yeah, but you have to get dirty in order to make a real change.
That's interesting. The profession that does assessment, is it actuaries? Who is that? What they're called?
Well,
Where they do the
insurance, you mean,
mathematics.
the underwriters.
The underwriters. Yeah,
Yeah, but the actual individuals that do the mathematics to calculate the risk
they're
assessment.
the actuaries. Yeah,
Yeah, actuaries. I didn't actually know
Yeah.
about that word until about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I realized, holy crap, that's a
So I'm meeting and mixing with all these interesting people that before were just a title, and I didn't know what they did. Now I do. And I just wanted design.
And actually is a nerd with an equation, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. I do want to check in on a couple of other quick topics before we wrap. I salute when you said you worked in Germany, right? Did you discover Hoof House?
Yes, I did.
I'm a big fan
but
of Hoof House.
we were a lot of what we were doing was bespoke, though, because of the nature of the site or the way the project's developed. But it was really, really interesting.
So for our North American listeners, Hoof House is like a post and beam type construction method. Like you can go to Hoof House in Germany, design the thing there, they'll build it, and then they'll ship it, and then just build it on a slab on grade situation.
It'll go up in weeks.
Yeah,
a few weeks.
It's a high status thing in Europe. Never going to happen in North America ever because of the way the things work here, but I do love it. It's sort of like grand designs before grand designs, right?
Right.
Okay, that aside, I want to talk about being an architect because at ASG, we employ a lot of architects in our environment and sustainability group, and they're all angry because they don't make money. And one of the reasons they're angry is they have to do a long degree, 4 years, right? And they have to, what would you call it, article and do their time, right? Which is in the UK, 7 years.
Well, total would be, there are different ways of doing it, but in total, yes. I suppose the shortest is 7 years. I did it 7 years.
Plus 7, right?
I did 3 to get my bachelor's, then a year out, as we called it, in professional practice, which was in Germany, as you know, then 2 years post-grad back at university, and then a year working in practice to get my professional exams. So yeah, that was my 7 years. There are different ways. Some do 3.5, some do 4.
But either way, you've got to go through that amount of time and that amount of brain work.
Yes.
And express also creative talent to come out and earn the same as a postman, a mailman.
It can start off that way. Yeah.
Now I know you're a partner in a firm, I top of a food chain, but it is astonishing to me that people who start on that endeavor don't work out what the average earnings are of an architect, which are shockingly low, actually.
So they are low. I have a theory they are low because the industry has gone that way as people try to be more and more competitive. It's sort of been driven by the lowest common denominator, the architects that can work for a low fee that will come in and undercut. So gradually the profession, apart from there are exceptions to that, obviously, that people that have the reputation and the brand and the specialism maybe, but it has brought it down. Whereas if you look at the law profession, the fees are set by the highest people, and everyone else, that's dragged everyone else up. So you've got some law, and I heard this from a barrister. This isn't my theory. This was a barrister's theory. So you've got some lawyers that are working for a very high fee, but don't really command that. But they're sucked up by those at the top who are commanding the higher fees.
Do you know the difference, though, right? And this is the difference. They can say the word no. I've yet to meet an engineer and architecture practice who can say the word no. Then people have not been born.
Yes, you do get drawn. You do get drawn. It's exciting. We're in it. There is a large, heavy vocational part of it. Absolutely.
And this is what goes to, arguably the effort and the time to become a lawyer is pretty much the same as an architect or an engineer, even, right?
Yeah.
Yet the earning capacity is different. And the main difference is lawyers can say no. Have you ever gone to a lawyer? Look, when I was at British Land, we used to have this, we were on call with Berwin's, right? One of the big lawyer firms. So you'd phone up, have a discussion for about 10 minutes. You get a bill for $500 £500 like the next week. Do you know what I mean?
Because they put the clock on. Yes.
Yeah, and it would
Oh,
be
yeah.
like
Oh, yeah.
pleasantries, question, pleasantries, and £500. Thank you very much.
Yep.
I had no
Well,
idea of this. I used to phone up, talk with them, and they'd be talking to me. And next thing you know, you got this slew of invoices coming in. Richard County, I'm like, stop phoning these people. You really need to. Right?
Stop talking to them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
more
you just-
succinct.
Yeah.
Now, I have to say, once I got over the initial shock, I have to admire that. Right? They've stuck together. They say no. There's no RFPs in legal work, right?
Yeah, it's a different discipline.
Yeah, it is. So I think, and then what you're doing with regenerative design, really, I know there's extra work and less work, but it's still like harder, right? So you're in a profession where fees are being commoditized, and you're talking about making it harder and more difficult. How do you square that circle?
Well, it's so far it's working.
Yeah.
It's not, as I said, every client, every project is to a greater or lesser degree.
Yeah.
We're fortunate to have some very good clients who are willing to go the extra mile, because that's what fills their ethos. So, but we're winning jobs because of it.
Right.
You know, we applied on one project where we were given a brief, and we had to respond to that RFP. And the brief was, we've got an existing building, we want to knock it down and build a new one twice as big on this footprint. So that was the brief. And in our interview, we convinced them after a site visit, you've actually, half of your site is this existing beautiful industrial building from 1908 that has been adapted over time. So you don't realize, you think it's, you don't realize how much of the heritage value it has and how much of it can be reused. And by the way, if you reuse that building, you could build your extension new, decant into that, and then completely refurbish the existing building. It might cost a little bit more, it might take a bit longer in your program, but you've saved a lot of material, you've saved your building, it might be easier for phasing. So just at a very high level, we won the job because of that. Everyone else complied with the brief to demolish and renew. It fitted with their ethos, and they hadn't considered it before because they thought it was just too difficult to do. So we're in this too difficult to do scenario with them, but
you're using it to
embraced
differentiate the practice, right?
Well, we're using it on this project for them so that they have a bit of history in their development that they're keeping, and then they're building new. And it might be something that's far easier, therefore, to get planning approval for, because their redevelopment is literally doubling the size of the existing building. What they're getting from us is all the knowledge and research that we're getting from our peer group and all the other projects that we're working on. So they're coming in what are we, 26? So they're coming in 6 years on in our research and development. So they're getting a lot more from us than, say, Lazari Developments did on the 22 Baker Street project when we first started on that. So there is this snowball effect, and that's got to end up being more commercially viable than business as usual.
Yeah, I mean, it's also going
especially-
to end up in higher fees ultimately, right? If it goes.
Yes, and also a more sustainable approach, because as we know, as I said earlier on, the people, the funds and the banks who are loaning for the development are looking at the ESG credentials of a scheme before they offer a loan.
Yeah.
And they're doing it in a way in order to make sure that they can tick all their boxes on ESG. They're offering preferential rates.
It's like back-to-back signaling, virtue signaling in a way, right?
Yeah, it is actually.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So look, we've come out. We're slightly over now. Actually, this has been good. We normally wrap up with a couple of quick fire questions.
Sure.
So my quick fire question to you is: I'm a young person. I'm thinking about becoming an architect. Pitch me. Why should I be an architect?
Why? Well, they have to really consider that. But I would say test the water first. Try and, if you can, work in an office before venturing down this 7-year course, which is, as we understand, will be getting shorter in the UK. It already is shorter.
Yeah.
It's 5 years in Spain, for instance. So
Right.
so the UK has to catch up with what's happening in the rest of the world. See if the construction industry is right for you, by maybe working on a building site, working in an office, getting a feel for everything, and then really try and understand what is it that you really want. What's your drive? Because there are going to be periods when you are, as a student, not much money. As a starting architect, it is
Just a
going to be
smidge.
it is going to be you're going to be qualified and realize, actually, I don't know much. There's so much out there still to learn, and you're
Right.
sort of constantly
True.
on a treadmill trying to play catch up. Yes, there's a part of it that's vocational, but there are so many, probably because of what you said, so many architects that are peers of mine that have gone into the profession and then dropped out for various reasons. And one of the key ones now is the financial hurdle.
Yeah.
There are apprenticeships starting, well, they already exist, but there are more and more different ways of having an apprenticeship or sponsorship. Try and seek those out as well before you start your university course. Some university courses offer it. If you can do that while you're working, then you're earning some money while you're studying. That's got to be a better way. When I worked in Germany, what was really surprising there, and I think this is a sort of an educational model that the UK still haven't adapted to, but are slowly trying to adapt. I was in an office as someone who had worked in university for 3 years. I'd done a little bit of work in architects' offices in the summer holidays, and the guy sitting next to me had been a carpenter for 3 years, and he was going into architecture. So he'd qualified the Fachhochschule route, not going to university, but going through the Fachhochschules, the technical colleges. Now in Germany, you could do 3 years as a carpenter and then move into architecture in year 4. Whereas the equivalent in England would be you'd have to go back to year 1 and start your 7 years. So they were, everyone has to go through exams and interviews and so on to get there. But it was far more attuned to sharing that knowledge. And that person coming into architecture who trained as a carpenter, it was no surprise that he was working in a practice that specialized in timber frame and passive solar architecture, because he knew how to detail all those timber buildings. I didn't know. I knew how to do beautiful drawings and design and think of the philosophy and the whole, but together that was a good pairing up.
That's a really great system. I love systems where you can slide in with experience and make that pay off, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that's my question done. I'm still not going to be an architect, though.
You can also move into development as an architect. So.
I have so many questions I'd like to ask you, but do you guys know who Amory Lovins is? Natural Capitalism, Rocky Mountain Institute.
Oh, yeah, I know Rocky Mountain Institute.
So Amory Lovins was an American who had a brilliant mind, and in fact, I don't know if it was Oxford University, but somebody in London, one of the Ivy League universities, actually rewrote its entrance policy so that they could get him in as a researcher because of his mind. They gave him a fellowship shortly after, like literally within 3 or 4 years. He basically told them to go pound sand, stuff your fellowship, went back to America and started the Rocky Mountain Institute. But he wrote an essay about a point in time. So now we're going back 30, 40 years from now, right? Ago, that we were at an intersection of time. And that if we chose the left path, it would be a continuation of the carbon-based economy, making stuff, destroying stuff, and that, we would be at some place where we are today. Had we taken the path 30, 40 years ago, where we were more about the philosophies that we're talking here in the program, that we'd be in a completely different place. So we knew many, many years ago that we would find ourselves having these dialogues and these discussions. So I guess a long way to introduce my question in terms of if you were addressing students, graduating students in programs that we were 40 years ago at an intersection and we made the wrong path, and that architecture today is more about rewinding where we are than as it is to going forward. Would you give them advice in terms of what the profession means today, in terms of the rewinding of what we've done in the past? How would you approach that?
Well, there is an argument there, a very good argument to say that we have the ability. I mean, it's as an industry, not just architects, but I think architects are pretty central there to learn from all mistakes of the past and correct those as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But the natural capitalism side of things, I'm reading. I've forgotten the author, terrible, but I've started reading a book on that, and there is so much literature out there about that, and I would definitely encourage people to read more about that and understand what's possible. But it's more than just creating a better environment. It's sort of leaving a legacy and enhancing and correcting some of the damage that's been done in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you have one of the good things about property development, architecture, or the engineering profession in the built environment is if you are someone who wants to make a contribution to anything at a big scale, it's a good place to be, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're going to have an interesting career. You're going to solve big problems. You're going to be frustrated. You're probably going to earn a decent living. Just be good at your job, right? That's the only bottom line.
Well, you have to be. And if you make mistakes, everyone hears about it. Everyone knows about it. You don't want that around you.
Remember, your names are on them drawings, mate. That's what you've got to do.
Exactly.
You can run, but you cannot hide. Yeah.
Correct. All right, man. But listen, thanks for coming on. That was really interesting, that whole regenerative design thing. I think the UK and your practice in particular are ahead with this. So you should be on every podcast possible, in my opinion.
Well, we're trying. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me for this. I've really enjoyed it. It's been really, really interesting. And maybe when things have developed further, if you're still going strong with these podcasts in a year's time or a couple of years' time, we'll catch up again.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Right. Thanks for coming on.
The Edifice Complex will continue in just a moment.
Are you passionate about the built environment? Do you want to learn from the industry's most inspiring, intelligent, and accomplished professionals? Then the companion to this podcast, Wisdom of the Property Crowd, is just the book for you. From Edifice Complex podcast interviews, this book distills the critical thinking, insight, and ideas of some of the property industry's most accomplished and respected practitioners. Each chapter is a synopsis of an hour-plus interview, capturing the takeaways and insights, including diagrams and images, to help explain concepts and ideas. There's also a brief bio about the interviewee and a QR code linked to the podcast episode for those that want to explore further. These are the mentors you wish you had in college. Wisdom of the Property Crowd by Adam Muggleton, available on Amazon worldwide.
And now, back to the show.
Right off the bat, when he said he was in Germany and he had to learn German fairly quickly. Well, right away that tells you something. But the other shoe that dropped on that was this, drawing is the universal language.
Yes.
And it's like mathematics or physics, when drawing protocols for the most part are pretty consistent around the world.
Absolutely.
And I actually wanted to ask him about, that was actually my second question in my mind, was actually about what did we lose when we went from hand created documents to the digital world? And I think
we lost a lot, actually, in my opinion. Yeah. Yeah,
we kind of lost the soul of the project. For anybody that's done hand drawings, because that's how I learned. There was no computer drawing when I was in school, and And even in drafting class, like I remember we would be sitting, there'd be rows of drafting tables, and there'd be the guy up front, and he'd be, this is how you draw a box, and 3-dimension isometric drawings and all that kinds of stuff. And then the next room over was the blueprint machine. You remember the smell from
The ammonia
the
coming off
ammonia?
that thing.
Oh, it was terrible.
But yeah, I was always taught a design begins and ends with a schematic.
Yeah.
Right. That's a little bit different in North America, but you don't see that nowadays. That's a really interesting thought, right? So when I was in London as a developer, you go to an architect's office and they'd all be around there, and then they'd break out the tracing paper and they'd start sketching. You just don't see that anymore, thinking about it, right? I haven't seen that happen in a long time.
I think there was a connection that we lost with drawings and design and engineering architecture when we went to the digital world. It's much like today, even with AI generated images.
Yeah.
Like there's something missing. I mean, the more AI generated images I see, the less I'm impressed by AI,
Well,
because it's
why?
becoming so washed out.
It's the uncanny valley, right? It looks good, but your subconscious knows it's not right.
That's exactly what it is, Adam.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, they call that the uncanny valley. And there is an uncanny valley actually in building drawings in a way, that when it's all Revit and it's been like copy and pasted, to people like you and me, you look at it, you think, something's not right there. Before it's, your finger's trying to put your finger on it, right? I think that's the same sort of phenomenon actually.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So, anyways, I wanted to. That was my second question, but it's. I thought it was really interesting. I really automatically triggered that on me. They do some interesting stuff. This whole business of cross-sector practice, where some people are just known, and God thank much that I never got into doing apartments and condos, because holy crap.
Yeah, kill me. Just kill me.
I can't, or strip malls or whatever, talk about boring practice. But to be able to go from healthcare to whatever their cross practice, I mean, that's good. That keeps you on your toes, right?
It does. And so the practice he works in now, the two seniors there, they did the London Eye. They, that big like Ferris wheel in London. So all of it, Hong Kong has one now, Singapore, Dubai.
Yeah, everybody.
But they did that. They were the first practice to do that. That architectural practice designed the London Eye and got it built.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's kind of cool.
So that's their real, if you like, the job that got them on the sort of like, the tall poppy gang.
Yeah.
And that was a high status job because they did it for something like £23 million, which in development terms is nothing.
Yeah.
That was obviously, this was in the millennium, like 26 years ago. However, still a feat. That thing was in the news all the time about when it came up, as it was built, would it be successful or not? And then it became a bit of a cultural icon. And then next thing you know, Singapore's got one, Hong Kong's got one, Dubai got one.
Brisbane.
Yeah,
they've
Brisbane,
got one.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's
they're everywhere.
So that practice where he's a partner, they did that.
Oh,
so
that's
they have
cool.
a bit of a calling card as being creative, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not SOM, which is like a big corporate, architects. But which was to my question, can you make money on it? Now, I'm sure they do okay. My real question with all this is it scalable? But if you've got the big developers like British Land, Great Portland Estates doing it, then it sort of becomes something others have to do if the big boys are doing it,
Right. Yeah.
So maybe it does have scalability.
Well, that's it. Yeah. I asked that question a lot too, like in a similar vein that has to do with high performance buildings. And I think we've got enough thoroughbreds in the barn now that they've been released out and people see the thoroughbreds and they compare it to the donkeys that they're working in, right? And, if you go back in time, you think, well, okay, and everybody was riding donkeys and all of a sudden someone showed up with a thoroughbred and it's like, well, which would you rather ride?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And then of course cars came along and anyways, it changed the world. He threw out some specs that I think probably are pretty applicable to around the world in terms of 60% of waste in construction, 42% carbon emissions, 50% of natural materials going into the construction industry. For people that are listening to the podcast, these are big, big numbers. And in a side gig, I've renovated a number of homes. And this last project, I got to tell you, Adam, watching and rather than demolishing the home, we actually restored it. But even in the restoration project, like I think it was 9 or 10 bins left this project to go to the dump.
Landfill. That's going to landfill, right?
And I got to tell you that it's still to this day, it's a rub.
It's the hidden tax, right? That's paid by everyone ultimately, because that landfill could leach into a water table.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the hidden thing people don't see, right?
Yeah.
It's the iceberg. You see the tip of the iceberg bobbing along, but below it is an absolute monster.
Yeah.
And that actually is the great analogy for waste in construction and society in general. How do you shrink that, the bottom half of that iceberg?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
no shiny stuff. Let's not forget. Right?
Well, and that's the thing, and everybody in that where we are, most everybody demolishes the house and starts from scratch. And
in North America as well, most houses are wooden construction, wood frame, right?
Yeah,
it's a frontier situation. Wood's used because it's available and cheap, and it's easy to knock down, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how you break that. That's a cultural phenomenon.
It is. It really is. Architecture is speed dating.
Yeah, I like that.
I got somewhere that's going to have to end up in a presentation. Like, that was hilarious. I like the fact and then you also brought this host to donor, taking sort of a medical analogy about the reusing of materials and reconstruction as opposed to demolition, deconstruction versus demolition.
Yes, that's interesting. So I've noticed that there's 3 or 4 like big demolition firms in the UK, and they sort of dominate. It's like an oligarchy, right? Mm-hmm. And they've all rebranded themselves. I sort of slowly noticed it subliminally recently, but now he said it out loud. I see it. They're all like, because of what's going on with like adaptive reuse, carbon account, all this stuff. There's a lot of pressure to like. Let's say I bought a 1980s office building. In the past, 25 years ago, I'd knocked that sucker down and built a bigger one later, straight away.
Yeah.
Now the pressure is on to like strip that back to the core, reuse the frame, right? It's going to be really hard just to knock something down and rebuild. So you're getting into this adaptive reuse. It's becoming social pressure, and now multiple bits of legislation are pushing you into adaptive reuse. So all these contractors are becoming like deconstructors and reuse people. They're all going to turn it into construction firms ultimately, I think, right? Because they're going to handle the deconstruction and the construction.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. It's really interesting, man.
I mean, anybody that's done demolition work before, there's no finesse. It's a sledgehammer, a sawzall, and a crowbar.
If I'd been in construction, I'd love to be a demo guy. What did you do today at work, darling? I knocked that building down.
But to be able to reclaim materials now, you're putting on your kid gloves.
Well, think about it, right? If there's a requirement for 50% reuse, and you've got, I don't know, a steel frame skyscraper, and you keep the frame, you're a long way towards that 50% already, and you can still have a new looking building sitting there, right?
Yeah, totally. I like on the downward impact, like on manufacturers and his response on how manufacturers have to start now thinking about their products, not in terms of a one-off, but like that product will be. And so I don't know, it'd be very difficult to get my head around this, but in the past, if I produce, for example, partitions, interior finishes, right, and I sold that to a client, that's one sale on my books, right? And I assume that there's some sort of growth pattern, and based on my past performance, my sales are going to continue to go onward. But at some point, if there's large enough adoption in the marketplace, I can no longer rely on my growth patterns, because if they're starting to reuse my stuff in the field, I'm not getting that second sale or the third sale or the fifth sale.
Here's a bit of thinking for you, right? You might rent a raised floor.
Yeah, right. So this is
you subscribe to it, and at the end of life, the manufacturer. So look, until very recently, all business models are based on infinite growth. Mm-hmm. If there is no infinite growth, it has to be a circular business model where I either rent it or I sell it, and I have an option to take it back. right?
Yeah.
That's how businesses stay in business, right? So you might find, so in the US, for instance, the high demand of data centers has created a shortage in raised floors, right? My daughter's on a data center project in New York. They cannot get a raised floor for love of God, right?
Wow.
So they're reusing it because they have to,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But they've had to do a whole redesign because they've got to reuse this raised floor that's only 2 foot high, not 3 foot high.
Yeah.
So, you know, so if I'm in the raised floor business, I would say you're building a data center, say, or an office. Let's say the fit out life of this office is 20 years. I'm going to rent you that floor on X per square foot per year. And you're going to pay me. They get a business model that's sustainable. Then they are obliged to take that back and reuse it at the end.
Yeah.
That could be the way we go.
Yeah.
You'll own
So
nothing and rent everything, and you'll be happy.
Well, and it's an interesting concept because then basically what you're looking for is as many rental contracts as you can.
Yep.
And your cash flow is based on it. The security of the cash flow becomes, you know, something you'd have to figure out a way to how to guarantee
You'd
that.
insure against that.
Yeah.
The same way you insure against, there would be an insurance model for that. But this could be how capitalist societies completely restructure themselves. It all moves into a rental, sort of like circular model rather than a growth model.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means for society, but that might be an inevitable outcome here, ultimately, certainly in the construction field. Yeah. Interesting thoughts. These are deep thoughts, mate. Are we rearranging the economy here in our little podcast?
You heard it here, folks. Yeah. First and foremost,
get me on Rogan. I'm going to have something to
say. The word downcycled, I've never heard that before.
No, I've not heard that. That's
now in my
word,
lexicon. It's a great word. Yeah. But I also was thinking when I heard the word downcycle, I thought, okay, I like the word. But is the word softening the impact?
Yeah,
you know, scrap and decycled is. You know how sometimes
if someone like suicides you, have you been decycled? I don't know.
Yeah, right. So, but it's a good word, and it's a part of our lexicon now, and I think I will probably would use that as I will use deconstruction instead of, you know. I'm glad we had him on, and his comment at the end there about, you know, in a couple of years get him back on again and to see where they're at, because like you said, like they're just, even though they've been doing it for 6 to 8 years, maybe 10,
they're learning and they're evolving.
They're learning. The fact that they're sharing, which is great, and a lot of our guests have freely shared a lot of their experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. He's I guess he's a seasoned architect now. I mean, when I first knew him, he was a young architect, but he's a very seasoned senior guy. People listen to him. He's got that quiet persuasion thing going on, right? He's not a showy presenter. No, but people listen to him, and he's very effective at getting things done. Yeah. I've seen that guy work very effectively. So yeah, he's one to watch. He's obviously embracing this regenerative design thing. You know, he might be in the future considered one of the early leaders of that movement. Yeah, probably will be, I'd say. Yeah. So anyway, that's good. So we found him first. Let's just take that away and win.
Absolutely. Right, so hey, just while we're on it, like one of the last episodes I talked to you about, second edition of the Wisdom of the Property crowd. Like, when are you going to write the second edition?
God, it was so brutal writing the first one. But there is an argument for it, because we've had some really, as we've gone on and sort of like the status of the podcast has gone up, we've had some real big hitters on the show. So Steve Apter the other day said, "Are you sure you want me on?" I'm not sure I'm good enough to be on this show.
Oh, that's great.
Trust me, you're good enough to be on this show.
Totally. Right. Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's something I might think about, actually, because also playing with the idea of doing some more shorts, like taking a couple of episodes and then getting some like 3 or 4 clips out of them, right? Send it to an editor, find me 4 or 5 great clips and put them out. Yeah. Because, some of the gems that like the knowledge bombs that are dropped are pretty awesome, right?
Yeah, they are. They really are.
I'm trying to think of a way to cost effectively pick them out and have them, and then just put them out there. You know? Because this is the whole point of the podcast, right? if you want to be an architect and you're passionate, Ian is someone you should model yourself on.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got to know who Ian is and where to find him. This is the point, right?
Yeah. You know, when I think back, like we now have whatever it is, 105 episodes, 110?
111 we're on soon.
Is it?
Yeah. 8 years in, baby.
I'm going to say something here to our audience, our listeners, particularly, you know, again, our STEM students that are in STEM programs and parents that maybe have, you know, kids, young adults that are trying to figure out what they want to do with their life and they're thinking about the world of architecture, engineering. You know, we have over 111, probably more like 150 hours, I'm guessing, of
easily
of content, and which is a huge amount. But still, if you can go, even if you listen to the summaries that we do, you will pick up, you know, wisdom that has been shared by some of the world's best and leading thought folks on what they do with their careers. We've had some amazing people on. I mean, if I had time, I occasionally go back and I listen to ones that I thought, you know, like that I want to listen to that one again. And when you go back and you listen to them again for the second time, Adam, I don't know how many times you do that, but there's some really good stuff.
Yeah, no, there is. I mean, this is sort of stuff I was looking for when I was young, but I didn't realize I needed it. This is the thing.
Right.
Yeah, that inspiration, that adjacent thinking, because you're so involved in yourself and trying to survive day to day, you don't have a chance to do that, right? This is great podcast time, right? Yeah, when I used to go home on a train for an hour every night from London, I'm like, I'm not reading or listening to a podcast, you know?
Yeah. I would say if I was struggling in my career back then and I had access to, you know, like even if I randomly picked 10 episodes and listened to the summaries that we do at the end, and I was struggling, I would probably, high probability within those 10 episodes, just the summaries alone, which would be, say, 5 hours or 4 hours of content, you would find a solution or you'd find some way to pivot or move, carry on.
Absolutely.
You know, yeah.
And that's the point, right? That's the mission here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
All right, man. So, see you on the next one.
All right, philosopher. We'll see you later. Cheers.
You've been listening to the Edifice Complex podcast with Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean. See you next time.